You think the, the black people are ready for a full-scale revolution in America?
At this time, it's a prelude to the revolution.
This interview with Huey Newton, Minister of Defense of the Black Panther Party, took place in the Oakland jail, where he is awaiting trial for what he terms self-defense. The ruins of the house you will see is what was left after the Oakland police surrounded it and shot it up in an effort to clean out the Black Panther's leaders. 17-year-old Bobby Hutton, treasurer of the Black Panther Party, was killed, and Eldridge Cleaver, Minister of Communications, was wounded. The house has since become a symbol for young people.
Here in America, we see that in the colony, the black people are poor. They own no vested interest really in the industry, and what happens is our political representatives in the past have been only pawns for their white political colleagues who do have power. And they depend upon these political colleagues to keep them in office, and they depend upon their political colleagues to justify their actions. The Black Panther Party says that because we don't have these other things as far as economically, then we must develop still a power base. Historically, when revolts occur, there's an indication that something is going to happen, and that it seems to be a prelude to the actual revolution where things will be changed. So I think we're moving towards this revolution. There are some alternatives, and the only alternative would be to first withdraw the troops from our many black communities, and secondly, that we demand control of the institutions within our community. These are first steps. So it's clear in my mind through the current events that black people are thinking in these terms, even though most people are not very articulate, that you always have the articulate minority. And the job of this articulate minority is to express the desires in some coherent fashion of the majority of the people.
Do you think that the right wing is using the black militants to wage full-scale war against the black people in America?
Well, as I see it, that the full-scale war against us has been going on for some 400 years.
I mean, completely wiped us out, the black people out. I mean, that they can open the concentration camp. They can have justification of the blacking off the black ghetto, wiring it off, put troops around it. Do you think the right wing agitating the Black Panther and any other black militant group in that direction?
I don't really think that whether they're agitating or not. I won't say that they're not. But what they're putting themselves in for is quite a different thing. You see, in other words, as far as black people being slaughtered, we're slaughtered every day. And historically, 50 million black people were killed on the Middle Passage alone, according to Melvin J. Herskovich. And this was an act of genocide, which is not talked about, and that the only thing people talk about is the plight of the Jews, where 6 million were killed. And when I state 50 million black people were killed, just bring them to this country, no one understands this. But what I'm saying is that our real danger is not the Birchites or the Minutemen or some other fanatics. That our danger is really the people who wear the uniform of the establishment, dressed in the clothes of the military or the police department. They're strong enough to wipe us out not wipe us out. They're strong enough to inflict great harm upon the community. And this thing about the fanatics going around agitating, I don't think it will have a great consequence to the black community. The killing of little Bobby Hutton, our treasurer, was a matter of attempting to wipe out the leadership of the Panther, along with getting rid of Eldridge Cleaver, because of his book Soul on Ice, that reveals many things about the corruption of the penal system. Not only the Black Panther Party, black people in general are in danger. As you would note that in the community where the police ambushed the Panthers, that the police fired upon the community in general. They fired in people's homes where there might have been women and children. Matter of fact, I understand that a child was almost killed, and that it was a continuation of the traditional tactics, not only of the Oakland Police Department, but the police throughout the country. And an immediate end will have to be put to this, and I think that what's happening now, that the Black Panther Party is merely speeding up time, as we know that whenever a man becomes frantic and strikes wildly, that he's becoming very weak. He's striking now everyone in the world, and we know that he won't be able to engage the whole colored world into a war, and also fight a civil war here with the revolutionary people of America.
I want to know the trend of young people in the colleges, not only black young people, but also white young people is coming forward for the revolution. In fact, there's a thing in the campus, even in Oakland here, where young people march around the jail and said, let Huey go. You think a young revolution is coming? That will be more and more coming.
Yes. Now the white intellectuals are responding to the liberation cry of the colony, and one of the reasons is that the intellectuals are very conscious of the political situation and seemingly very sensitive, and they're attempting to avoid a suicide of the United States. They see very well and very clearly that the United States is about to commit a suicide, because any time that you take the bread and the livelihood away from a people or an individual, you're automatically threatening your own life, because that person then will rise up against you and possibly to do you bodily harm, because he's demanding life and he cannot live without bread. The intellectual sees this, and he's attempting to curtail it, and he sees that there has to be some modification or a revolution in the country to replace the old racist institutions.
So what you're saying here is it's not a race war, say, because it's understood now what's happening is a race war. Can you explain that better?
The first place, the intellectuals make up a small percentage of the general population, and it's a small percentage of whites who are revolutionary white people, and that it's very difficult to divide the race issue from the economical struggle. Number one, because white America is by and large a racist people, and not only to black people in the colony here, but to people of color all over the world. And I think that the on one side, as far as black people are concerned, it's not a race issue. It's simply an economical struggle and a cultural struggle. But the difference between it's a conflict between the culture of the white American middle class and the black lower class, and that but the black people don't hate white people because they're white. They hate white people because they inflict racism upon them, and they're exploiting us.
Tell me, Huey, what can the militant group or the revolutionary group do to protect their leaders? What can we get through to the people that when like Hutton went down and Malcolm got killed, Martin Luther King got killed, you are in jail, Cleaver is in jail. What how can we impose on them the importance that it's just as important as when Kennedy got shot? The loss is that great. What are you doing toward?
The first thing that we have to realize that the leaders don't have any strength really. That the vanguard group of the revolution doesn't have strength other than the strength of the people. The black community should be the protector of its leaders, and that the black community should be a haven for the leaders and a stronghold for protection. At this point, black people are afraid of the tremendous power that the races are flexing, and it's a matter of overestimation of the power that race of America has, and that it's an underestimation of our own strength. But a time will come when black people will rise up like a mighty storm or hurricane, sweeping all evil gentry and corrupt officials into their graves. And nothing will be able to hold this force back because it will be so swift. And at this point, the masses will have great faith in the vanguard and the leadership, and that they will protect the leadership. In every country where revolution has occurred, the vanguard has always suffered in the early days because of a lack of trust of the people. And it's a matter of overestimating the enemy. I'm thinking of Cuba now, and Bolivia in particular, where the peasants supported Che Guevara and the guerrillas, but at the same time, Che was very aware of the fact that the villagers might give him up at any moment simply because of the fear and the strength of the Bolivian regular army with the help of the CIA. But the same thing happened in Cuba, but because the guerrilla lived for a length of time in Cuba to develop certain strongholds, then the people became more secure and had more faith in the vanguard group. And I think that this will happen in this country, and I think that it's even happening now because the community is becoming more and more receptive to the problems and the demands that the vanguard group makes upon the community.
What motivates you? What makes you take up such a tremendous, I would say, burden? Because it's so tremendous because you're giving your life for it. So I would like you to explain to me.
Well, from a very early age, with my association with people who were politically inclined, the first group was a black nationalist group. I was at the age of about 16 or 17. They sort of guided me into an awareness of the plight of black people in America and people of color all over the world. And from that age on, I've been involved with political movements. And that, of course, I've experienced racism. Just being black here in America, one will necessarily experience exploitation and be affected by racism. I started to handle the question and strive for a solution to it. And up until this time, I think with this awareness, one becomes more and more sensitive. And as one realizes the magnitude of the plight, one understands that people cannot live under this system or any capitalistic system because it excludes most of the people, and just a very small circle enjoy the fruits of the labor of the many. So working from this premise, that I found it necessary to pass this consciousness on to other people. And the black man in general, ever since he's been here in America, has strive towards this freedom. Denmark Vesey and Nat the Prophet Turner were men who were speaking of freedom.
Tell me, could you tell me the relationship between the people that you work with? You started out with like Hudson and Cleaver, and all the other Panthers that are in jail or indicted now. Or tell me the relationship. Could you explain that to me? How you meet and briefly, and what make them change and so forth.
Well, it's a matter of as far as the general membership of the Panthers, it's a point in pointing out to them the pitfalls of the institutions here in America. Eldridge Cleaver, who's the Minister of Information of the party, and Bobby Seale, who's the chairman, and Bobby Hutton, who's the treasurer, were very close to me, are very close. Bobby was just as a brother. We view each other with a great love and a great understanding, and that we try to extend this to the general black population and also oppressed people all over the world. And I think that we differ from some other groups simply because we understand the system better than most groups understand the system. And with this realization, we attempted to form a strong political base based in the community with the only strength that we have, and that's the strength of a potentially destructive force if we don't get freedom.
What is there about this system that creates and breeds racism?
I think that racism in this country starts out as a very historical thing. It was probably stimulated through the greed for profit. Of course, that black people were brought here in chains as slaves for the wealth of the enslaver, who was the European. And the reasons for white people choosing black people from south of Sahara was probably because of the twisted mind of the European. And I think this stems into the religious situation, that the European was unfortunate for some reason and acclaimed one God, or absolutism, what we call it. He worshipped one God, and this God was all good, absolutely good, all-powerful, and this God, of course, didn't have the animal drive that the human being has. Because the European identified with this one God, then he was put in a situation of rejecting himself. Let me finish this. He rejected, for instance, his sex drive. If he did anything that deviated from the code of God, then he was automatically a witch or something subhuman. Then when he contacted the African, especially south of Sahara, where we had dualism, and our God had two or more heads, that you ran into a situation where the African could accept himself as a human being, accept his sex drives, and he didn't have to project his humanism to anyone else. And the European projected all of his evilness that he himself had to, or so-called evilness, really it was just human drives, to the African. And so it was a combination, what I'm attempting to explain, of not only economic exploitation, but also racism. And then coming to this country, because it was so profitable for the European, or the American in this case, to work the slave, that this racism became ingrained, and many white people don't understand it now.
Let me say this. I have watched a beautiful relationship between you and Gary that worked beautifully. And when people talking about Black Panther and racism, the relationship here between you and your lawyer, who is white, I haven't seen any racism in this case. What makes the difference here?
Well, if you were familiar with Panthers in general, you wouldn't see any racism either. That we're not racist. We believe that the solution to the problem here in America is not, the goal is not racism, but the goal is freedom. And that the Black Panther Party is willing to work with any revolutionary people, and that it's not a color thing, that the Black Panther Party and black people in general, I believe the bulk of us are colorblind, that it's a matter of freedom, a matter of being free from the exploiter, nothing more, nothing less. The Black Panther Party is first a political party, and that we've analyzed the political situation here in America, and we see that black people are a colonized people, and that we have to, if we're going to find an answer for our problem, which is a problem of liberation, that black people are in a state of slavery, and we must be liberated from the mother country. And the first steps that we'll have to take towards liberation is control of our community. If we have no control of the destiny of the institutions within our community, then we have no guarantee of any other political right. And as we analyze history, we see that according to some historians, John Hope Franklin for one, and also E.B. Du Bois, says that the reason that black Reconstruction failed was because of a lack of political and economical and military power. And so the Black Panther Party is attempting to develop this political power. And one of the chief things that happened after the Civil War was the disarmament of black people by Lincoln. And Lincoln made certain statements to the effect that he didn't want black people to form guerrilla groups so that they could get true liberation. So this is why he disarmed them. We were promised land, which was never given by the Free Man's Bureau, 40 acres and 2 mules, according to Du Bois. All we got after the Emancipation Proclamation, then Black Reconstruction, was some black representatives and in the government. What was peculiar about these black politicians was that, in fact, they didn't represent a power force. Usually in the political arena, a political representative represents a power group, whether it's economical power or feudal power, commonly called land power, or even military might. We notice that if one cannot protect his land, then he doesn't really have control of it. We notice that this government, after it makes a political decision, it always has its force to back up that political decision, and in the dress of the military or their police force.
So what you're doing is forming a political program then?
Yes, we do have a political program.
Could you just outline just briefly what's your political program?
Well, our political program is to secure the ability to determine the destiny of our community. It's to ensure our community of decent housing. We want full employment for our people with a high standard of living that will provide a high standard of living, because this is the richest country in the world, and we can't see any reason why that this government cannot employ all of its people.
Say for instance, talking political program and employment and full employment. Suppose the white community decide, okay, today that is not going to hire any black because of the revolutionary. Where would you say would be the basic starting of the black man? Where would he start from then? What would he do?
If white people were to stop hiring black people?
Yes.
Yeah, well, this is approximately the situation now, that a large percentage of black people are unemployed, and we're in the poverty zone, that our people suffer from malnutrition, that we suffer from poor education due to a lack of economical strength. And where we would start from is to modify the whole economical system. we also demand a plebiscite to be placed within the many black communities set up by the UN, so that black people can then vote and see whether they want to stay a part of this country or not. We are a culture within ourselves. We're a nation within ourselves, and we have the right to claim nationhood. We say that the capitalistic system hasn't ever been able to employ all of its people. So therefore, we're demanding a change in the government system. And if black people decide, we're demanding land so that we will be an independent country. But this will be up to the bulk of black people through the vote. And the UN will supervise this vote. But as far as where do we start with first revolutionizing or changing the American institutions.
Yes, now getting to the revolution, you think this is the start of a revolution, a full-scale revolution?
I think that before all full-scale revolutions, there are many revolts that are somewhat unsuccessful, because if they were successful, then there would be a revolution. And now that with the resistance that occurred in Detroit and Newark and Los Angeles and in Oakland, that we're seeing that black people are along the road are going towards liberation, and I would predict that a full revolution will occur in this country if there's no immediate change of the government structure, which I doubt that this country is mature enough to revolutionize itself without bloodshed.
How can we get, say, the bourgeois black or the middle-class black who is enjoying certain privileges of the white man, and he believes now this privilege deserves him and he's trying to get more? How can we let him know that there's a revolution, that he should, how will he be able to do that?
Well, of course, the black bourgeoisie are the hand-picked leaders picked by the power structure to lead black people. Black people are now losing confidence in the black bourgeoisie, simply because the black bourgeoisie has not led us to liberation. So the first step is for the black lower classes to reject the traditional leadership of the black bourgeoisie. And this is happening because, as you very well know, the black bourgeoisie has not endorsed the rebellions throughout the country, but yet the rebellions have occurred. So it's very clear that there is a tremendous gap between the masses of the lower class, which compose about 95% of black people in America, and the black bourgeoisie, who might compose 3% at the most, and that would be overestimating, I would say.
Would you say, Huey, you're very young, about 23, 24, right?
26.
26. Would you say that the younger generation are getting away from the bourgeois power? Would you say they're more coming toward your thinking? So it's like the old versus the young, and the young people are springing up a new kind of thinking.
I think the revolution has always been initiated by the young. Simply because the older people can see perhaps some change because they've lived a number of years and they see a change from, say, 50 years ago up to now. And the younger generation hasn't seen these changes at all. And I think that this is one of the reasons that in every country the younger generation lead the revolution, but some very conscious older people do identify with the revolution, and I think this is universal.
Huey, I saw you in court the other morning, and while some things were being said, and I was thinking, what do you feel about sitting in court being judged by the people that the revolution that you're fighting is against? How we feel? Tell me.
I feel very little different, and I feel just being free on having so-called freedom on the streets of white America. There, you have in the so-called freedom, you have you're completely controlled by a white establishment, a white racist establishment, and the court system is simply a part of this institution, this racist institution that's oppressing all black people throughout racist America. And that as far as the justice, I see very little justice that a black man can possibly get within the court system as it exists. And the black community is now standing up and demanding a revolutionary change within the court system.
Tell me, Huey, if you was in a position to predict your future, what would you say it would be like?
That's a very difficult question. But I have all faith in the people, in the black community, and I have very good counsel, and I have hope that change will come very soon, so that the court will be modified, so that black people will get justice all over this country. But it will be very difficult for me to say exactly what will, or even predict what will be the outcome.
Your environment here in the jail, could you say what it does for you in terms of your strength in your ideas and just the people that you're surrounded with? What it does, could you explain that?
Well, at this point, and I think that I won't be resigned now or in the future, that my beliefs are as strong or even stronger as they were before this incident. I remember when I used to go to church in Sunday school, the minister would say often that suffering is good for the soul, that it makes one stronger. So I think that I've experienced this here in jail, because the punishment seems to make a black man stronger, and that's one of the difficulties that the whole penal institution has with black people, that when they imprison a black man, that rehabilitation, as they call it, doesn't work really, because black people realize that they're political prisoners and that they're oppressed in the prisons just as they are in the so-called free world, and that all it does is makes one more hostile towards the oppressor.
Huey, it was interesting that we were talking the other day, and somebody went by, a young man like yourself went by, and you know him, you grew up together. Now, this man wasn't a militant, he wasn't into the military, but he was still here, he was still had the handcuffs on, he was still in jail. Could you explain the significance of that?
Well,
he wasn't really fighting a black militancy as you're doing, a revolution, but yet he was still here with you.
Well, I would say that he's fighting a, thank you, he's fighting a black thing. He's fighting for a black cause, but perhaps he's not conscious of it. Many black brothers here in jail are in jail for robbery, for burglary, and so forth, and I view them as political prisoners, because the first thing is an injustice for them to be here, because I can't see where a man can rob or take what's already his. One thing that I would like to say to the revolutionary youth throughout this country and throughout the world, that the responsibility for the change is upon our shoulders. The older generation has proven that they have either been disinterested or unable to change the institutions that have caused murder throughout the world, and America being the monster at the head of the monster to create the disturbance all over the world. So it's going to be our job to revolutionize the world. As far as we're concerned, that we're advocates of the abolition of war. We do not want war, but war can only be abolished through war. And in order to get rid of the gun, we found it necessary to take up the gun. That's from Chairman Mao, and I think that most revolutionaries agree with this throughout the world. I think that change will only come through struggle. And of course, as I pointed out, and I'll recapitulate, that we don't want war, but if it's necessary for us to wipe war out with some strong tactics, we're prepared to do this.
Free Huey now! Free Huey now!